Dwight D. Eisenhower rose from a relatively unknown staff officer to become the supreme Allied commander in Europe, responsible for orchestrating the largest military coalition in history. Born in Texas in 1890 and raised in Kansas, Eisenhower developed a reputation early in his career for his organizational ability and calm temperament. He had never commanded troops in battle before the Second World War, but his talent for planning and diplomacy brought him quickly to the attention of American and British leaders. By 1942, he was placed in charge of Operation Torch, the Allied landings in North Africa, where he coordinated American, British, and Free French forces in a campaign that marked the Allies' first major step toward reclaiming Europe. Eisenhower's greatest achievement came with Operation Overlord, the D-Day landings in Normandy on June 6, 1944. The scale of the operation was immense. Hundreds of thousands of men, thousands of ships, and vast fleets of aircraft all had to be coordinated across multiple nations. Eisenhower's leadership style, measured, inclusive, and focused on maintaining unity among often competing Allied commanders, was critical to the success of the invasion. His decision to proceed with the landings, despite uncertain weather, demonstrated his ability to balance risk with opportunity. Once ashore, he managed the Allied advance across France, ensuring that logistical support kept pace with the rapid movements of men and machines. What made Eisenhower particularly successful was not only his grasp of strategy, but also his capacity for diplomacy. He had to manage strong personalities like Montgomery, Patton, and de Gaulle, while also maintaining trust with leaders such as Churchill, Roosevelt, and later Stalin. His even temper and ability to listen prevented divisions within the alliance from undermining the war effort. By 1945, Eisenhower directed the final drive into Germany, overseeing the encirclement of the Ruhr, the crossing of the Rhine, and ultimately the link-up with Soviet forces that signaled the collapse of Nazi power. Eisenhower's legacy as a general is one of coordination, coalition building, and strategic vision. Unlike some battlefield commanders known for dramatic charges or sudden maneuvers, his genius lay in orchestrating the vast machinery of war and ensuring that disparate allies acted as one. His success in doing so not only secured victory in Europe, but also laid the foundation for his later career as President of the United States, where his steady hand and commitment to unity continued to define his leadership. Douglas MacArthur was one of the most dramatic and controversial figures of the Second World War, a general whose sense of destiny matched the scale of his achievements. Born in 1880 into a military family, MacArthur graduated at the top of his class from West Point and quickly established himself as a brilliant, if unconventional, officer. By the time war broke out in 1941, he was commanding U.S. and Filipino forces in the Philippines. When Japan invaded, his position quickly became untenable, but his defiance and the famous declaration, "I shall return," transformed him into a symbol of Allied resolve in the Pacific. Forced to retreat to Australia, he set about planning the long road back with determination and flair. MacArthur's success lay in his vision of island hopping, a strategy that bypassed heavily fortified Japanese positions in favor of striking at weaker, strategically vital locations. This approach saved countless lives and resources, accelerating the Allied advance. Campaigns in New Guinea and the Solomon Islands demonstrated his ability to combine air, sea, and land forces with precision. He inspired his troops by often placing himself close to the action, cultivating an image of the fearless commander, always leading from the front. His return to the Philippines in 1944 was staged with deliberate symbolism, stepping ashore at Leyte and declaring his promise fulfilled. The campaign was one of the most decisive in the Pacific, crippling Japanese control and securing a vital base for the push toward Japan itself. MacArthur's leadership style was unique, highly personal, charismatic, and sometimes imperious. He could be difficult for politicians and fellow commanders to manage, yet his ability to inspire his men and envision bold strategies was undeniable. In contrast to the grinding attrition that characterized many campaigns, MacArthur often sought decisive strokes that reshaped the balance of power. Even when criticized for vanity or theatricality, he achieved results that changed the course of the war. By 1945, MacArthur was preparing for the invasion of Japan when the atomic bombs ended the conflict. He accepted Japan's surrender in Tokyo Bay, standing as the central figure of victory in the Pacific. His legacy is marked by both brilliance and controversy, but there is no denying that his vision and determination were instrumental in breaking Japanese power. To his soldiers, he was more than a general. He was the embodiment of the promise that no setback would prevent ultimate triumph.
George S. Patton was the embodiment of aggressive warfare, a general whose boldness and relentless drive made him one of the Allies' most feared commanders. Born in 1885 into a family with a strong military tradition, Patton was fascinated by history and the art of war from a young age. He became a pioneer of armored warfare, studying tanks and mechanized operations long before many others took them seriously. By the time America entered World War II, Patton was prepared to unleash his vision of fast-moving, hard-hitting offensives that could shatter enemy defenses and keep them off balance. In North Africa, Patton first proved his mettle, taking command of American forces after the setbacks at Kasserine Pass. His strict discipline and insistence on aggressive training quickly transformed raw troops into a fighting force, capable of standing against Germany's seasoned veterans. His leadership helped turn the tide, and by the invasion of Sicily in 1943, Patton's daring maneuvers outflanked Axis defenses, capturing Palermo and racing to Messina ahead of the British. His speed and audacity made him famous, though they also caused friction with fellow commanders. Patton's greatest achievements came in 1944, during the campaign in France. Leading the U.S. Third Army after the Normandy landings, he unleashed one of the most dynamic advances of the war. His forces swept across France in a matter of weeks, liberating towns and cutting off German retreat. When the Germans launched their counteroffensive at the Battle of the Bulge, Patton astonished even his allies by pivoting his entire army northward within days, relieving Bastogne and helping to blunt the offensive. His ability to act decisively in moments of crisis was unmatched, and his men revered him for always being at the front, demanding speed and daring from everyone. Patton was not without controversy. His fiery temper, blunt language, and occasional clashes with superiors caused problems, but his results were undeniable. He understood how to harness mobility, firepower, and morale to overwhelm the enemy, and his campaigns remain studied as models of armored warfare. Patton's legacy is that of the relentless warrior, a commander whose audacity kept the enemy on the defensive and whose presence inspired soldiers to achieve feats they never thought possible. In the great drama of World War II, he stands as the symbol of bold, unyielding attack.
Bernard Montgomery, known to his men simply as Monty, was Britain's most prominent general of the Second World War, and the man who gave the Allies their first major land victory over Germany. Born in 1887, Montgomery served in World War I, where he was badly wounded but proved himself a determined officer. By the time the Second World War erupted, he had built a reputation as a strict disciplinarian who demanded the highest standards of training and morale from his troops. Though his style could be prickly and his ego large, these qualities made him a confident leader who inspired loyalty among his soldiers. Montgomery's defining moment came in North Africa. In 1942, he took command of the 8th Army at a time when morale was low and the Africa Corps under Erwin Rommel seemed unstoppable. Montgomery reorganized the army, instilled discipline, and carefully prepared for a showdown. At the Battle of El Alamein, he delivered a decisive victory, halting Rommel's advance and beginning the long push that would drive Axis forces out of Africa. The triumph was hailed as a turning point of the war, boosting Allied morale worldwide. After Africa, Montgomery led forces in the invasions of Sicily and Italy before taking command of Allied ground forces for the Normandy landings in 1944. His cautious but methodical style contrasted sharply with more daring commanders like Patton, yet his planning was crucial to establishing the beachhead in France. Montgomery's leadership during Operation Market Garden later that year was more controversial, as the bold airborne offensive failed to achieve its objectives, but his steady command remained vital throughout the campaign in Northwest Europe. Montgomery was sometimes criticized for arrogance and for claiming too much credit, but his strengths lay in his meticulous preparation and his ability to give his soldiers confidence. To the British public, he became a national hero, the man who had stopped Rommel and helped pave the road to victory. His legacy is that of a commander who embodied determination, discipline, and method, proving that with careful planning and inspired leadership, even the toughest enemy could be defeated.
Chester Nimitz, the quiet and steady admiral who commanded the U.S. Pacific Fleet, proved to be one of the most successful naval leaders of the Second World War. Born in Texas in 1885, Nimitz graduated from the Naval Academy and specialized early in submarines, a background that gave him a deep understanding of naval technology and logistics. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the U.S. Navy was reeling from the loss of battleships, but Nimitz was quickly appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. His calm leadership and clear strategic thinking would turn the tide of the war at sea. Nimitz's genius lay in recognizing the importance of aircraft carriers over traditional battleships. He made bold use of limited resources, focusing on carriers and submarines to strike at Japanese forces. His first major test came at the Battle of Midway in June 1942. Using intelligence breakthroughs that revealed Japanese plans, Nimitz set a trap and achieved a stunning victory, sinking 4 Japanese carriers while losing only 1 of his own. Midway shifted the balance of naval power and proved that Japan could be beaten. From there, Nimitz directed the vast and complex island-hopping campaign that gradually pushed Allied forces closer to Japan. Battles at the Coral Sea, the Philippine Sea, and Leyte Gulf showcased his ability to coordinate immense fleets of ships, aircraft, and amphibious forces across thousands of miles of ocean. Unlike some flamboyant commanders, Nimitz led with quiet authority, ensuring harmony among often competing personalities like MacArthur and Halsey. His strategic patience allowed the United States to strangle Japanese supply lines while steadily advancing. By 1945, Nimitz's fleet dominated the Pacific. His forces supported the final bloody campaigns at Iwo Jima and Okinawa, paving the way for the eventual invasion of Japan that was ultimately preempted by the atomic bombs. His leadership style, calm, pragmatic, and focused, ensured success in one of the most difficult theaters of the war. Nimitz's legacy is that of the admiral who turned disaster into victory, reshaping naval warfare forever and proving that careful planning and steady resolve could win even the vast Pacific Ocean.
Erwin Rommel, famously nicknamed the Desert Fox, was Germany's most celebrated general of the Second World War and a commander respected even by his enemies for his boldness and skill. Born in 1891, Rommel had served with distinction in the First World War, where his daring maneuvers earned him early recognition. By 1940, during the invasion of France, he led the 7th Panzer Division so aggressively that it became known as the Ghost Division, moving so fast that even the German High Command often lost track of it. His ability to exploit speed and surprise became his trademark. Rommel's reputation reached legendary status in North Africa, where he took command of the Afrika Korps in 1941. Facing limited resources and long supply lines, he nonetheless conducted brilliant offensives, driving British forces deep into Egypt. His mastery of desert warfare, use of mobile armored thrusts, and knack for improvisation earned him admiration from both his troops and his adversaries. The British press, while fighting him, openly praised his daring, which was unusual in wartime. At his peak, he appeared nearly unstoppable. Yet Rommel's fortunes shifted after the Battle of El Alamein in 1942, when Montgomery's well-prepared 8th Army decisively halted him. Cut off from supplies and increasingly outmatched, Rommel was forced into retreat, and eventually his forces were pushed out of Africa. Despite these setbacks, his leadership remained admired. Unlike many German generals, Rommel was not an ardent Nazi. His focus was on soldiering, and his humane treatment of prisoners distinguished him from others. Later in the war, Rommel commanded defenses along the Atlantic Wall, preparing for the Allied invasion of France. Though he foresaw that Normandy was the likely landing site, his recommendations were not fully followed, and the overwhelming Allied assault in 1944 left him powerless to stop the tide. His name, however, remains synonymous with daring and tactical brilliance. Rommel's legacy is complex. A brilliant battlefield commander, respected for his skill and integrity, yet ultimately unable to alter Germany's defeat. He remains one of the most famous generals of the war, the archetype of the daring, resourceful field commander whose exploits still capture the imagination.
Erich von Manstein was regarded as one of Germany's most brilliant strategic minds of the Second World War, a general whose plans reshaped the battlefield even against formidable odds. Born in 1887 into a military family, Manstein rose through the ranks with a reputation for sharp intellect and calm professionalism. His most famous achievement came in 1940 when he crafted the bold plan that enabled Germany to conquer France. Instead of repeating the failed strategy of World War I, he proposed a surprise thrust through the Ardennes, a region the Allies thought impassable to large forces. The plan worked spectacularly. German armor cut through the French defenses, crossed the Meuse at Sedan, and encircled Allied armies, leading to France's rapid collapse. On the Eastern Front, Manstein's reputation grew even further. In 1942, he masterminded the recapture of Sevastopol, earning his promotion to field marshal. Later that year, when the German Sixth Army was trapped at Stalingrad, he attempted a relief operation that came close to success but was undermined by Hitler's refusal to allow a breakout. Despite this setback, Manstein soon achieved one of his most remarkable victories. In early 1943, after the disaster at Stalingrad, he launched a counter-offensive in Ukraine that stabilized the front and drove back the Soviets, restoring German confidence temporarily. Manstein was known for his ability to combine flexibility with boldness, often maneuvering smaller forces to outwit larger enemies. His leadership at the Battle of Kursk in July 1943 showed both his ambition and his limits. He argued for delaying the offensive until German forces were fully prepared, but Hitler insisted on launching it sooner. The battle ended in failure, marking the decline of German offensive power in the East. Although often critical of Hitler's interference, Manstein remained loyal to the regime, which later tainted his reputation. Still, as a strategist, he was unmatched among German generals. His vision of mobile warfare, decisive strikes, and operational maneuver made him one of the most successful commanders of the war, even if Germany's resources and leadership ultimately doomed his efforts.
Georgy Zhukov was the Soviet Union's greatest general of the Second World War, a commander whose leadership turned the tide against Nazi Germany and secured ultimate victory in the East. Born in 1896 to a poor peasant family, Zhukov rose through the ranks by sheer talent and determination. Before the war, he had already distinguished himself in Mongolia at the Battle of Khalkhin Gol in 1939, where his use of armor and encirclement crushed the Japanese, foreshadowing the strategies he would later employ against Germany. When Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, the Red Army reeled under devastating losses. Zhukov was quickly called to stabilize the front, organizing defenses around Moscow. In the bitter winter of 1941, he coordinated a massive counteroffensive that pushed German forces away from the Soviet capital, shattering the myth of Nazi invincibility. His ability to inspire resilience in both soldiers and civilians during this desperate moment made him a national hero. Zhukov's finest moments came at Stalingrad and Kursk.
At Stalingrad, he planned and directed Operation Uranus, the great encirclement that trapped the German Sixth Army and delivered one of the most decisive victories of the war. At Kursk in 1933, he prepared elaborate defenses and reserves that absorbed the German offensive before launching a massive counterattack that shifted the balance permanently in the Soviets' favor. From then on, the Red Army marched westward, with Zhukov at the helm of many major operations. By 1945, Zhukov commanded the final assault on Berlin. His forces stormed the city in brutal street fighting, forcing Germany's surrender and ending the war in Europe. Though often ruthless and demanding, Zhukov's leadership combined determination, operational brilliance, and an unshakable will to win. His soldiers respected him, even if they feared his strict discipline, because he delivered victories when the nation needed them most. Zhukov's legacy is immense. He was not just the most successful Soviet commander, but one of the greatest generals of the entire war. His ability to recover from disaster, rally his nation, and orchestrate decisive campaigns secured him a place among history's legendary military leaders.
Konstantin Rokossovsky, one of the Soviet Union's most gifted commanders, was a master of operational planning, whose campaigns were crucial to breaking Nazi power in Eastern Europe. Born in 1896 to a Polish family in Russia, his early career was turbulent. During Stalin's purges of the 1930s, Rokossovsky was imprisoned and tortured, but unlike many of his fellow officers, he was later reinstated when the German invasion created a desperate need for capable leaders. This ordeal left him scarred, but also hardened, and when given responsibility, he proved himself a calm, analytical commander with a gift for orchestrating complex operations. His reputation grew during the defense of Moscow and the counteroffensive that saved the capital in 1941. But his true genius emerged in 1944 during Operation Bagration, one of the largest offensives of the war. Facing Army Group Center, the backbone of Germany's Eastern Front, Rokossovsky devised a daring double envelopment, striking the enemy from multiple directions at once. The operation was meticulously prepared, with overwhelming artillery, deception measures, and precise coordination of infantry and armor. The result was catastrophic for the Germans. Their lines collapsed, hundreds of thousands were captured, and the Red Army advanced hundreds of miles in a matter of weeks. It was perhaps the most devastating single defeat inflicted on Germany during the war. Rokossovsky's style differed from the fiery aggression of Zhukov. He was methodical, careful, and remarkably composed, earning respect from subordinates for his ability to remain clear-headed under immense pressure. He valued preparation and coordination above reckless charges, and his troops trusted his judgment. Even Stalin, often mistrustful of his generals, came to respect Rokossovsky's calm authority, famously allowing him to argue for his battle plans rather than simply obeying orders. After the war, Rokossovsky continued to serve both in the Soviet Union and later in Poland, where he became defense minister. His legacy rests on his brilliance as a planner and his ability to execute vast, multi-pronged offensives with precision. Few generals demonstrated such a combination of resilience, intellect, and tactical insight. Rokossovsky remains remembered as the quiet architect of some of the Red Army's greatest triumphs.
Isoroku Yamamoto, Japan's most famous admiral, was both the architect of its early triumphs and the symbol of its ultimate overreach in the Pacific War. Born in 1884 into a humble family, Yamamoto rose through the naval ranks with a sharp intellect and an unconventional outlook. He studied in the United States at Harvard and later served as naval attaché in Washington, experiences that gave him deep insight into America's vast industrial capacity. This knowledge shaped his strategy. He believed that Japan could not win a long war of attrition against the United States, so its only chance lay in delivering a crushing initial blow to shatter American morale. That philosophy led to the audacious attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Meticulously planned and daring in execution, the strike crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet's battleships and thrust Japan into the spotlight with a sudden and stunning victory. Yet Yamamoto himself was uneasy. While the attack was tactically successful, he knew it had awakened an enemy whose strength he deeply respected. His prophetic words, that Japan might run wild for 6 months but could not guarantee victory beyond that, would prove all too accurate. Yamamoto directed Japan's rapid early conquests across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, but his boldness met its limit at the Battle of Midway in June 1942. There, American codebreakers anticipated his moves, and Japan lost 4 carriers in a single day. This disaster shifted the balance of naval power permanently. Though Yamamoto continued to command Japan's fleets, orchestrating massive engagements such as the Battle of the Solomon Islands, he could not reverse the tide. His leadership remained admired by his sailors, who respected his energy, discipline, and personal courage. In 1943, while touring frontline bases to encourage his men, his plane was intercepted by American fighters after his itinerary was deciphered. His passing dealt a heavy blow to Japanese morale. Yamamoto's legacy is complex, a strategist of genius whose Pearl Harbor plan shocked the world, but also a realist who understood the limits of his nation's resources. He remains one of the most fascinating figures of the war, embodying both Japan's daring rise and its eventual fall in the Pacific.